So I wanted to go over the probability of what happens, when you roll a pair of dice. And for those of you probably know what those probabilities are. But before we get into that, I want to make a comment about it, because the difference between this distribution of score of a roll of dice versus the other ones we've talked about is, and I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, the other distributions we've talked about, categorical, binomial, multinomial, uniform. I think that all of those distributions would be something that would be meaningful to all cultures. And not only that, I think those distributions would be meaningful to an extraterrestrial society if they exist. I think it would be meaningful to an extraterrestrial society in a different universe if they exist, because I think it's pure math and it's very, very, goes to the very heart of what probability is and what information is. And since any universe is made up of information, maybe you could come up with some idea where that's not relevant, but I feel like those are very generic in terms of culture and even planet and even universe.
I don't know if I'm ready to jump on that bandwagon,
okay.
but you saying that seems to imply that the one we're about to talk about maybe isn't in that same category.
Well, of course. I mean, of course, anyone could come up with that with the idea of a pair of dice and the idea of rolling a pair of dice, and it's not there are certain features of the dice that make it likely it will be. That some other culture will come up with it. First of all, if you have something that you roll that you're going to have a random chance, well, you could do a coin, right? You could do a coin flip, and then you could have some polyhedron. A cube is kind of a pretty standard one.
You could spin something like a dreidel.
Yeah, the dreidel or a top, and that can give you any number of different categories. Spin the wheel, but
traditional dreidels are indeed four-sided, correct?
Yes. So so I don't think the idea of a die is necessarily in Star Wars they called it a chance cube, if you remember correctly. But the idea of a cube is also, I think that's one where you have to have a three-dimensional universe. So I think alien civilizations will have a chance cube, probably.
Well, it's very interesting to think why the cube, because those who play lots of Dungeons and Dragons or similar games, there are many polyhedral die, ranging from I don't think it's technically a three-sided die, but a die that I think basically you roll a fancy six-sided die for your three-sided, but four-sided upwards to 20-sided is kind of the common upper limit, but then there's some 100-sided dies and some more exotic ones.
Okay.
So why do many cultures settle on the six-sided die? Why is that most common here? And would we expect that to be the case for non-Terran cultures, perhaps?
So we know, going back to it was either Plato or Aristotle, someone back then who discovered, or maybe it was Archimedes. I'm not really sure.
Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, one of those Greeks.
Well, okay. There are 5 regular polyhedra, and that means that they're made up of all the same shape. In the case of the cube, the square. Each of those shapes is a regular polyhedron. In other words, each side is the same length and the same angle. And then, basically it's the polyhedral symmetrical. So it's not like, one side of the cube comes together like this, where 3 squares come together, but another side of the cube, 4 squares come together. Right. Like, it's not like that. So there are only 5 of those shapes that you could make in 3-dimensional space. And that's tetrahedron, octahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron, and cube. So right there, you kind of, any civilization that manipulates three-dimensional space will kind of narrow it down to those five as being pretty special. And of those five, the cube is the only one that really kind of, packs very easily. So I feel like the cube is going to have is going to be discovered.
You're gonna lose a lot of our listeners here who are diehard hexagon fans. But granted, hexagons don't work as well in 3 dimensions that way.
Yeah, the hexagons are great in 2 dimensions. They connect very well. Actually, I might be having a guest that does that stores location data, geolocation data on the Earth using a hexagonal system. So that could be interesting in the future. Hint, hint, coming up. But yes, I do think that a cube would be relevant to other cultures. Now, in other universes, I don't know. That I could be less sure. I'm pretty sure they'll have a binomial distribution. I don't know if
and I'm tempted to ask, well, but what if this extraterrestrial perceives the world in 4 dimensions instead of 3? But I don't even know how to conceive of that and what the implications.
I don't know how to conceive of that within our universe. Yeah. So it's possible, but certainly
I'm sure there's the math for it, but I can't.
Yeah, certainly there are humans. And it's just how we manipulate the world. The cube seems reasonable. The numbers kind of work out because we can count to 6 pretty easily. So, okay. So
this is even more fundamental than perhaps something like base 10, which if we didn't have 10 fingers and 10 toes, maybe we wouldn't have settled on base 10. Maybe we would have settled on, base 6 or 12, or hexadecimal or something. But this is much more of a fundamental feature of the physics of our universe, that you think brings us to the cube being kind of a common feature.
Right. Now, the idea of scoring the sides 1 through 6 and then rolling 2 and adding those 2 together, that's a little bit of a twist on it that I think would not be relevant for any independently drawn culture. Although I'm kind of interested to hear if, look, it might be that 2 is just small enough to make things interesting. And that's why I think usually there's 2 die. 1 die, the problem is that every single side is equal. It's uniform, right? 1/6. And so what you want in some of these games is the ability to have an outcome that is very likely, like the 7 in craps. And then you want an outcome that's not likely at all, like the double 1 or the double 6 to get 2 or 12. Notice also another few other points is that, it's kind of like a triangular distribution, which is usually a continuous one, but it's, it's 1 out of 36 is the
snake eyes,
the score of 1, right? And then a score of 2, right? And then a score of 3 is 2 out of 36, and so on and so forth. And so it kind of goes up linearly until you get to 7, and then it kind of descends linearly until you get back down to
1 in 36.
To double 6, right? So it goes, it's 1 out of 36, 2 out of 36, 3 out of 36, so on and so forth, as you count up and count down. And so, what was the point I'm making? Yeah, in some interesting games, you want things that are more likely and less likely. It kind of fixes the game. I want to point out that this is not a multinomial distribution unless you care about how you got that total. So if you say, well, I rolled a 7, but it matters if it was a 3 and 4 versus a 2 and a 5, then it would be a multinomial distribution where there would be 6 categories and 2 rolls. But because we're adding them together and presumably in most cases throwing away that information, it's not a multinomial distribution. So it's something a little bit more funky than that. So I thought that was an interesting specialized distribution that is finite, but not necessarily fundamental, but more relevant. And probably a lot of people sometimes say, "Oh, I didn't follow the probability distribution of the week." Hopefully, people followed this one.